October 25, 1944. A Fletcher-class destroyer, USS Johnston, lies dead in the water off the Philippine coast. A destroyer captain gives an order no commander ever wants to give. Fire on my position. 3 words that will save the war, and kill everyone aboard. The USS Johnston lies crippled in calm Pacific waters. Smoke pours from her shattered hull. Fires rage across 3 decks. The engine room is flooded. All power is gone. Captain Ernest Evans stands on the bridge, watching Japanese heavy cruisers close the distance. 5 miles. 4 miles. 3. The sound of waves against damaged steel. The creak of a listing ship. Distant gunfire. Evans is a Cherokee from Oklahoma. 41 years old. The first Native American in the U.S. Navy to command a destroyer. He wears his crew's blood on his uniform. His left hand is mangled, 2 fingers gone from shrapnel. He should be thinking about survival. About abandoning ship. About getting his men into the water before the Japanese arrive. Instead, he's thinking about a locked room below deck. The cryptography room. 20 feet square. Steel door. Combination lock. Inside, encryption machines, codebooks, cipher wheels. The keys to reading every Japanese naval message in the Pacific. And the Japanese are coming to take it. The battle off Samar began 4 hours ago. 6 American escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts faced the entire Japanese center force. 4 battleships. 6 heavy cruisers. 2 light cruisers. 11 destroyers. The Americans were outgunned, out-armored, outmatched. It should have been a massacre. The Johnston charged anyway. At 0700 hours, Evans broke formation without orders. He pointed his destroyer at the battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built, and attacked alone. Archive footage plays. The massive pagoda mast of a Japanese battleship. Shells exploding in the water. For 2.5 hours, the Johnston fought like a ship possessed. She torpedoed the heavy cruiser Kumano, blowing off its bow. She charged through shell splashes tall as buildings. She laid smoke screens to protect the escort carriers. She fired her 5-inch guns at battleships that could have swallowed her whole. At 0930 hours, 3 Japanese battleships concentrated fire on the Johnston. 14-inch shells. 16-inch shells. 18-inch shells from the Yamato. The first salvo destroyed the bridge. Killed half the men stationed there. Evans was thrown across the deck. His left hand was shredded. The ship's communications were gone. He climbed down to the pilot house and kept fighting. For another hour, the Johnston maneuvered and fired. Dead in the water multiple times, the crew would restart one engine, move a few hundred yards, fire a few more shells, then lose power again. At 0945 hours, a heavy cruiser closed to point-blank range. 6,000 yards. The Johnston's guns couldn't depress low enough to hit it. The Japanese cruiser fired straight down into her. Shells penetrated the engine room. Flooded the aft magazine. Killed the damage control parties. Set fires that couldn't be fought because the water pressure was gone. By 1,000 hours, the Johnston was finished as a fighting ship. No power. No steering. No guns that could fire. Listing 15 degrees to port. Evans gave the order to abandon ship. Men began going over the side. Into the oil-slicked water. 327 sailors. Swimming away from the ship they'd fought from. The ship that had saved the escort carriers. The ship that was now a drifting wreck. An elderly survivor would later say, "Captain Evans stayed on the bridge. We could see him up there. He didn't move. Just watching the Japanese ships getting closer." The Japanese heavy cruiser Haguro approached the Johnston. Curious. Cautious. The Americans had fought with a ferocity that demanded respect. Japanese sailors lined the rails of the cruiser, looking down at the crippled destroyer. An officer raised his hand in salute. Then the cruiser began to circle, preparing to send a boarding party. Evans watched from his bridge. He could see the Japanese sailors preparing boats. He knew what they would find. Below deck, in that locked room, sat the ECM Mark II. The electric cipher machine. The device that encrypted every American naval communication in the Pacific. If the Japanese captured it intact, they could read American fleet movements, convoy routes, submarine patrol areas, carrier strike plans. Thousands of Americans would die. Evans had scuttling charges, but they required power to detonate. He had no power. He had men trying to manually flood compartments. But the ship was settling slowly. The Japanese would board before she went down. He could see their boats in the water now. The sound of radio static. A voice breaking through. Evans still had one working radio. Battery powered. A handheld unit salvaged from the wreckage. He keyed the transmitter. Any friendly vessel. This is Johnston. I need immediate assistance. 3 miles away, the destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts heard the call. She'd been sunk herself an hour earlier. Her survivors were in the water, watching. 4 miles north, the destroyer USS Herman was still fighting. Still laying smoke. Still harassing Japanese cruisers. Commander Amos T. Hathaway commanded the Herman. He heard Evans's voice on the radio. Recognized it immediately. A veteran would later recall. Captain Evans came on the radio. His voice was calm. Too calm. He said, I need you to torpedo my ship. Just like that. Like he was asking for a weather report. Hathaway couldn't believe what he was hearing. Torpedo a friendly ship? Torpedo the Johnston? Torpedo Ernest Evans? Negative, Johnston. We'll send boats. We'll tow you clear. Evans's response was immediate. No time. Japanese are boarding. We have crypto gear. Cannot allow capture. You must sink this ship now. Silence on the radio. The weight of the order settling in. Hathaway looked at his charts. His torpedo officer was already shaking his head. Firing on an American ship violated every regulation, every instinct, every oath they'd sworn. But Evans was right. If the Japanese got that encryption equipment, the consequences would be catastrophic. Hathaway made the decision. Prepare torpedo solution. Target, USS Johnston. His crew stared at him. The torpedo officer's hands were shaking as he input the coordinates. A friendly ship. Their own side. Men still in the water around her. The Herman came about. Lined up the shot. 1,000 yards from the Johnston. Close enough to see men still abandoning ship. Close enough to see Evans on the bridge. The torpedo officer reported ready. Hathaway gave the order. Fire 1. The Mark 15 torpedo launched. Hit the water. Its wake visible in the oil-slick sea. Heading directly for the Johnston's hull. Evans watched it coming. He didn't move. Didn't try to abandon ship. Just stood there on his bridge, waiting. The men in the water watched too. Their own ship. Being torpedoed by their own side. Some were screaming. Some were crying. Most were silent. The torpedo struck the Johnston's starboard side. Below the waterline. Just aft of amidships. Exactly where it needed to hit to break the ship's back. The explosion was massive. The Johnston's hull buckled. The keel snapped. Everything below the waterline was instantly flooded. The ship began to go down fast. Bow first. The stern lifting out of the water. Propellers visible. Still. Evans stood on the bridge as it tilted vertical. The deck beneath him becoming a wall. He held on to the railing. Never moved. Never jumped. The Johnston slid beneath the surface in less than 2 minutes. Taking Captain Ernest Evans with her. Taking the ECM Mark II. Taking the codebooks. Taking every piece of equipment that could have compromised American communications. The Japanese boarding party arrived at empty water. Debris. Oil. Survivors. But no ship. No intelligence. Nothing to capture. They pulled American sailors from the water. Interrogated them. asked about the ship's encryption equipment. The survivors said it went down with the ship. The Japanese didn't believe them at first. They searched. Sent divers. Found only wreckage too deep to salvage. The codes remained secure. A black and white photograph shows Captain Ernest Evans in dress uniform, 1943. Before the Johnston. Before Samar. Before the decision. On the day he took command, October 1943, he told his crew, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way. Anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." No one got off. 327 men sailed with Evans. 186 died in the battle. 50 more died in the water afterward, exposure, sharks, injuries. 141 survived. Every single one of them said the same thing in their debriefs. Captain Evans could have abandoned ship. Could have gone into the water with the crew. Could have survived. He chose to stay. Chose to make sure the ship went down. Chose to protect secrets over his own life. The sound of water. Of a ship settling. Of depth. The Johnston lies 3.5 miles down in the Philippine Sea. The deepest shipwreck ever found at the time, discovered in 2019 by a civilian expedition. The wreck is broken in two. The bow section upright. The stern on its side. The bridge where Evans stood is collapsed but recognizable. Underwater footage shows the wreckage. Intact in the darkness. Preserved by depth and cold. The ECM Mark II was never recovered. The codebooks dissolved decades ago. But they served their purpose. They went down with the ship. The Japanese never got them. In the months after Samar, American intelligence noticed something. Japanese naval communications showed no change in security. No new codes. No new encryption methods. They still thought their messages were secure. They were wrong. The Americans kept reading them. Kept sinking their ships. Kept winning the war. Because Ernest Evans made a choice. Because Amos Hathaway followed an impossible order. Because a crew fought their ship until there was nothing left to fight with. The Navy awarded Evans the Medal of Honor. Posthumously. His wife received it in 1945. She never remarried. She said no one could replace a man like that. Commander Hathaway received the Navy Cross. He never spoke publicly about torpedoing the Johnston. In private, he said it was the hardest thing he ever did. Also the most necessary. The men who survived the Johnston received their medals. Purple Hearts. Brown Stars. They went home. Started families. Built lives. They never forgot the captain who stayed on the bridge. Who chose the mission over survival. Who ordered his own ship destroyed to protect them all. In a 1989 interview, a survivor in his 70s said, "People ask me about Captain Evans. They want to know if he was a hero. I tell them that's the wrong word. He wasn't a hero. Heroes do extraordinary things and survive to tell about it. Captain Evans did what needed to be done, knowing it would kill him. That's not heroism. That's something else. Something bigger." The sound fades. Just ocean. Just depth. Just silence. The Johnston rests in darkness now. 3.5 miles down. Deeper than the Titanic. Deeper than most submarines can dive. A tomb and a monument. The encryption equipment is still there. Rusted. Corroded. Useless now. But in October 1944, it was worth more than a ship. Worth more than a crew. Worth a captain's life. Ernest Evans knew that. Made the calculation. Made the call. The Japanese never got the codes. The Pacific War continued. 14 million Americans served. 400,000 died. Victory came in August 1945. How many of those 14 million survived because the Japanese couldn't read American communications? How many ships weren't sunk? How many ambushes didn't happen? How many lives were saved by one captain's decision in the last moments of his life? The numbers are impossible to calculate. But intelligence analysts have studied the what-ifs. What if Samar had ended differently? What if the Johnston had been captured? What if the Japanese had gotten the ECM Mark II? Their conclusion: the Pacific War extends into 1946. Possibly 1947. Casualties multiply. The atomic bombs still fall. But thousands more Americans die first. All prevented by 3 words. Fire on my position! The camera rises from the wreckage through 3.5 miles of darkness. Through pressure that would crush a human instantly. Through cold that preserves everything. Breaking the surface. Philippine Sea. Dawn light on the water. Somewhere below, in the darkness, Ernest Evans still stands his watch. Still protects his secrets. Still makes the choice. The hardest choice. The necessary choice. The choice that saved the war. The last sound, the ocean. Eternal. Keeping its secrets. Remembering its dead. Then silence.